A boy harassed my daughter every day in school. The school told me it was a crush. I believed them, until she came home with bruises. I was halfway through grading a stack of essays in my home office when I realized how quiet the house had become. Amelia usually played music when she was in her room. Nothing loud, just something in the background, soft enough to blend into the walls. That afternoon, the silence felt too heavy. It wasn't just the absence of noise, it was stillness, the kind that made me put my pen down. I walked down the hallway and opened her bedroom door without knocking. She was sitting on the carpet, legs crossed, surrounded by uneven clumps of blonde hair. She was holding a pair of kitchen scissors in her right hand. Her grip was loose, but the blades were still open. There were faint red marks along her arms. Nothing deep, but deliberate enough to notice. I didn't ask anything. I just stepped forward, knelt down, and gently took the scissors from her fingers. She didn't resist. She looked up at me, eyes wide and glassy, and said quietly, "Maybe now he'll leave me alone." That was the only thing she said all night. She went to bed early, without asking for dinner, her uneven hair falling across the pillow in broken lengths. I stood in the hallway for a while, just outside her door. I didn't hear crying. I didn't hear movement. It was just quiet. Over the next 3 days, I tried to get her to talk. I asked small questions during breakfast, tried bringing up her favorite shows at dinner. She barely touched her food. She nodded when I spoke, but never offered anything in return. Eventually, I called her homeroom teacher, Miss Peterson, to ask if anything had seemed off lately. She actually laughed. "Oh, you mean Archer Hale," she said. "He follows Amelia around like a little puppy. It's adorable." Boys that age don't really know how to show their feelings properly. The way she said follows her around didn't sit right with me. I didn't say anything at the time, but something about the phrasing stayed with me. I didn't know how to bring it up with Amelia, and maybe I wouldn't have had to. Because that evening, when she walked in the front door, she didn't even take her shoes off before collapsing onto the couch. She didn't cry. She just started talking. Quiet, controlled. As if she'd been practicing it in her head all day. Archer had been calling her Goldilocks speech every day in class, turning it into a chant during recess. A few boys joined in. He'd cornered her in the hallway more than once, demanded hugs, stood too close. One time, he grabbed her face with both hands and told her, "When I talk to you, you look at me. I'm only hurting you because that's what people do when they're in love." She said the school brushed it off. Miss Peterson called it puppy love. I told her calmly that next time he touched her or cornered her, she should raise her voice, loud enough that a teacher couldn't ignore it. I figured they couldn't pretend not to notice if the whole hallway heard. Looking back, I wonder if telling her to speak up made things worse. The next day, she came home with bruises on her wrist. Her shirt collar was torn. She didn't need to explain. She'd followed my advice. During picnic, Archer approached her again, and she yelled at him in front of everyone to leave her alone. A teacher came over. But instead of addressing him, she scolded Amelia, said she had embarrassed Archer, said she should apologize. Later that day, after school, Archer and 3 other boys had followed her behind the gym. She didn't say what they did in detail, just that one of them recorded while the others blocked the way. Archer told her, "You embarrassed me, so now we're even. Tomorrow, I'll show you what real love feels like." She fell asleep early that night. I sat by her door again, listening to her breathing. The next morning, while she was eating cereal, I gently lifted her sleeves and took photos of the bruises. She didn't protest. She didn't say anything, just kept staring into her bowl. Then I went through her backpack. I found notes crumpled into the front pocket, dozens of them. Some were written in messy handwriting. "You're mine. Stop ignoring me, or else." One had a drawing of a girl with X's over her eyes. I laid everything out on the kitchen table and took photos. Amelia watched me silently. I asked if there were any text messages. She shook her head, but she wouldn't look at me. That afternoon, the school called, not about Archer, about Amelia. The principal said he was concerned about her behavior. Said she'd been disruptive lately, that sometimes kids act out when there's tension at home. He suggested I consider counseling. Said maybe a fresh start would help. Maybe a different classroom, somewhere quieter. I told him she had bruises on her wrists, asked if anyone reported that. He paused, and then said, Miss Peterson mentioned she'd made a scene, that she'd embarrassed a classmate in front of others, that it had caused tension. Then he said, "We can't have students creating a hostile environment for others." The call ended with the suggestion that Amelia be moved away from her friends. To a new class, with a new teacher, 2 days later. When she came home, she didn't say anything at first, just went to her room and closed the door. When I checked on her, she was sitting at her desk, staring at the wall. "They moved me," she said. I asked why. She said, "The principal said it's for my own good, that I need space from the situation." Then she turned to look at me. Her face didn't show anything, but her voice was flat. "He wins. He always wins." After the classroom switch, Amelia stopped mentioning school altogether. She no longer left her sketchbook open on the kitchen counter or muttered stories about the strange things her classmates said during lunch. Each day, she came home a little earlier, walked with her shoulders slightly more rounded, and headed straight to her room without a glance toward the couch where we used to sit and talk after dinner. On the 4th day, I noticed her lunchbox still full in her backpack. The sandwich hadn't been touched, the fruit was warm, and the juice box was leaking from a tiny puncture near the straw hole. I didn't say anything right away. Instead, I asked her gently whether she'd like to eat in the library instead of the cafeteria. She nodded but didn't offer a reason. The next day, she tried exactly that and was turned away. According to her, the librarian had received a report from a student claiming Amelia had been damaging books. No proof was shown, no follow-up questions asked. The librarian simply said, "I can't allow that again," and pointed to the door. By that point, I had already started preparing. I had researched a voice recorder app that could run silently in the background of her phone. I showed her how it worked, explained why I thought it could help, and let her decide. She tapped accept without hesitation. That night, I double-checked the settings and made sure it would store everything in the cloud just in case her phone ever went missing. The first real recording came the following morning during second period, somewhere near the east hallway water fountain. Archer's voice came through clearly. Low, calculated, and far too composed for a 12-year-old. "You know my dad's on the school board, right?" he said, pausing just long enough for the implication to land. "He says if you don't start being nicer, your dad's going to lose his job. He knows people. You want him unemployed? Then smile when you see me." The clip was less than 30 seconds, but it played back like a blueprint for psychological warfare. I listened to it twice before saving it into the evidence folder I'd been building for weeks. I labeled the file, transcribed every word, and printed 2 copies. One for me, one for what I hoped would be a meeting with someone who could actually do something. That meeting happened 2 days later in the office of the district superintendent, a man named Dr. Hayes, whose wall was covered in university degrees, framed news articles about educational grants, and photos of high school football championships. He greeted me with a handshake that lasted only a moment too long and a rehearsed smile that disappeared as soon as we sat down. I placed the folder on his desk, opened it to the index, and explained that I had compiled physical evidence. Photos of bruises, threatening notes, audio recordings, all connected to ongoing harassment against my daughter by a specific student. He barely glanced at the pages. Instead, he folded his hands in front of him and said, "Mr. Morrison has already reached out to us. He's very concerned about your daughter's mental state. From what he described, she's been fixating on his son, following him around, making up stories when her feelings aren't returned." I kept my voice level as I slid the transcript across the desk. "That's not what this is. This is him threatening her, explicitly, and telling her that if she doesn't comply, I'll lose my job. Dr. Hayes didn't pick up the page. Instead, he leaned back slightly and replied, "We've seen these kinds of recordings before. Sometimes they're edited, taken out of context, and frankly, when we start hearing about obsessive behavior from a student, especially one who's already had disciplinary issues, it's our duty to consider all angles. We've also been made aware of emails you've allegedly sent to other parents regarding Mr. Morrison and his son." I hadn't sent a single email, but I could tell from his tone that he wasn't interested in verifying anything. The narrative had already been established long before I walked into that office. The meeting ended without any commitment to investigate, no promise to follow up, and no interest in the contents of the folder I'd spent weeks compiling. When I asked what would be done in the meantime to protect Amelia, Dr. Hayes simply said that their focus was on maintaining a peaceful school environment for all students. That night, I noticed the rear passenger tire of my car had gone flat. At first, I thought it was just another coincidence, something left over from the cracked pavement down the street. But 3 days later, it happened again, this time to the front tire, and I found a nail perfectly positioned just behind the tread. The next week, it was the driver's side. I started checking the driveway each morning and eventually found 3 more nails. All small, all shiny, all scattered exactly where my wheels would roll over them. I kept them in a glass jar on my desk. It wasn't until 2:08 SM one morning that the pattern truly shifted. I woke to find Amelia standing next to my bed, her face pale, holding out her phone with both hands. She didn't say anything right away, just turned the screen toward me and tapped to open the photo gallery. There were 3 pictures. Grainy, but clear enough. Each had been taken from outside our house, from slightly different angles. All were focused on Amelia's bedroom window. In one, the curtain was drawn, but her silhouette could be seen moving across the room. In another, the light was off, and the flash of the camera had caught the faint reflection of her mirror. The most recent photo had been timestamped just an hour earlier, so I called the police immediately. 2 officers arrived just before 3:00 Road ISM and stood in our living room while I explained the situation. I showed them the photos. I replayed the recording. I listed the previous incidents. The threats, the bruises, the notes, the school's refusal to intervene. They nodded, wrote something in a small notebook, and said, "It could be anyone. Hard to prove it's him without catching him in the act. You might want to consider putting up some cameras." Amelia didn't sleep that night. Neither did I. The following evening, around 8 o'clock, someone rang the doorbell. I checked the peephole and saw Linda Hale, Archer's mother, standing on our front step alone. The porch light made everything clear. She had a fresh bruise forming just below her right eye, darkening along the edge of her cheekbone. When I opened the door, she spoke quietly, glancing back toward the street. "I need to talk to you," she said, "about Mark, about what he's been teaching Archer." I stepped aside and let her in without asking another question. Linda sat at our kitchen table with her hands wrapped around a steaming cup of tea that I wasn't sure she'd actually drink. She didn't remove her coat. She didn't ask how Amelia was doing. She stared at the steam rising from her mug and stayed quiet until the silence made me almost forget she was there. "He has cameras," she said eventually. "Not looking up? All through the house. Some are obvious, others are hidden. I only found a few of them by accident." I didn't interrupt. I let her keep speaking. "He's been showing Archer how to track phones, how to find someone's location without them knowing, how to monitor their movement. Mark calls it keeping tabs on what's yours." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small black USB drive, set it down on the table, and pushed it toward me with one finger. "I copied files from his office computer," she said. "Videos from our home security system. You need to see what he's been teaching our son." I plugged the USB into my laptop and waited as the folders loaded. The first video opened automatically. It showed Mark Hale standing beside Linda in what looked like their home office. He had one hand on her upper arm. He was demonstrating something. Body positioning, leverage, the kind of grip that wouldn't leave a visible bruise but would make it impossible to pull away. See how she reacts, he said in the video. They always resist at first. That's normal. They're testing you. But if you show them you're serious, if you don't back down, they'll stop trying. Archer was off screen at first, but then he stepped into frame and asked a question I couldn't quite hear. Mark responded by turning Linda toward him, showing him exactly where to apply pressure along the back of her shoulder. Here, he said. It hurts, but it won't leave a mark. Smart women don't fight it. Linda understands that. Don't you, sweetheart? She didn't respond in the video. Her face was still. Her arms hung at her sides. I closed the file and opened another. This one had a different timestamp, but the same setting. In it, Archer was holding a school-issued tablet, and Mark was guiding him through a list of names. Several were highlighted. Few had been circled. This one, Archer asked. Mark replied, she talks too much. If she ever repeats anything she hears at home, we shut that down fast. You don't scare her. You isolate her. No one listens to someone who's alone. After watching 3 more clips, I copied the entire drive to an encrypted folder on my desktop, uploaded a backup to the cloud, and transferred a second copy to a flash drive I kept on my keychain. When I looked up, Linda was still watching her tea. He keeps everything in a notebook, she said. Names, dates, people he's helped, people he's hurt, favors, threats. He writes it all down like a ledger. I asked her why she was telling me this now, after everything that had already happened. She finally looked at me and said, because Amelia isn't the first, and she won't be the last. She stayed for nearly an hour. Before she left, she gave me the names of 2 people. Sarah Chen, a child services specialist she trusted, and Catherine McKenzie, a family lawyer who had handled difficult abuse cases in the past. Linda said she hadn't contacted them yet, but she was ready to if I thought it was time. After she left, I stayed up through the night organizing every file, every screenshot, every image of Amelia's bruises, every recording, every note. I didn't know exactly what I was building, but I knew it had to be airtight. The next morning, I called the school board to request an appearance at their next open meeting. I was told the agenda was full, but that I could submit written concerns in advance. I declined. I would show up in person when the day came. I dressed in the same shirt I'd worn to the superintendent's office and arrived 20 minutes early. The boardroom was already half full. At the center of the long table sat Mark Hale, dressed in a dark blue suit, calm and unreadable. I waited until public comment opened. I stood, introduced myself, and began speaking. I didn't get far. Mark stood up slowly and raised one hand. Mr. Chairman, he said to the board president, I'd like to offer some context regarding the concerns raised. Mr. Thompson has been harassing my family for several weeks now. His daughter has developed an unhealthy obsession with my son. She's been approaching him repeatedly by spreading false stories. Rather than addressing this, Mr. Thompson has chosen to escalate accusations. He's contacted other parents. He's even followed my wife home. None of it was true, but no one interrupted him. He continued, I believe it would be appropriate to table this discussion until Mr. Thompson has taken the proper steps to seek mental health support for his child. The motion passed without debate. I walked out of the boardroom without speaking to anyone. No one stopped me. No one asked for evidence. No one even looked in my direction. That night, Amelia came home from art class with paint splattered across her sweatshirt. Her hands were shaking as she set her backpack down. He tried to cut my hair, she said. Archer had come up behind her during art period while she was working on a canvas. He grabbed a pair of scissors from the supply bin and tried to cut off a piece of her hair for his collection. When she pushed him back, he stumbled into a rack of paint bottles, knocking them to the floor. The teacher walked in just as he hit the ground, saw the mess, heard Archer's exaggerated cry of, she pushed me, and gave Amelia a week of detention. That was the moment I knew the system would never protect her. I watched her hands tremble as she picked at the dried paint on her sweatshirt. She didn't look up. She didn't cry. She just sat there in the corner of the couch like someone waiting for permission to fall apart. I asked her what happened, gently, without pushing. And she told me everything in a voice that barely rose above a whisper. Archer had followed her into the art room while the teacher stepped out to make a copy. He picked up a pair of scissors and came up behind her. Without warning, he reached out, grabbed a lock of her hair, and said he was starting a collection. She shoved him back, instinctively, and he tripped over a chair and hit the supply shelf. Paint bottles toppled to the floor. Some exploded on impact. When the teacher walked in, the mess was already everywhere. Archer started crying. Amelia stood frozen, the scissors still in his hand. The teacher didn't ask questions. She announced a week of detention and told Amelia to stay behind and clean up. I wanted to drive back to that school and demand answers, but I knew exactly what would happen if I did. The same story. The same deflection. The same carefully measured tone of concern masking indifference. So I told Amelia to stay home the next day, just for one day, and promised I'd figure something out. But she insisted on serving the detention. If I skip, they'll add more, she said, her voice dry and certain, and he'll just use it against me. The next afternoon, I waited outside the school parking lot, just in case. Detention ended at 4. At 4:10, I saw her coming out of the side building alone. Her shoulders pulled inward like she was bracing for impact. When she got in the car, she was shaking. They were at the windows, she said, all of them, pressed up against the glass, making faces, gestures. Couldn't even see the teacher. He just sat at his desk the whole time, staring at his phone. That night, I told her we were done. I wasn't sending her back into a place that punished her for protecting herself and rewarded the ones who hurt her. She didn't argue. She didn't ask how it would work, she just nodded slowly and whispered, "Thank you," before curling into the blanket on the couch and falling asleep for the first time in what felt like weeks without tension in her shoulders. The next morning, I submitted a formal withdrawal notice. I didn't use the word homeschooling. I simply said that due to ongoing safety concerns, my daughter would not be returning. I included a short summary of documented incidents, carefully avoiding anything that could be dismissed as emotional language. I sent it by certified mail and email, copied to the superintendent's office. For the next 3 days, the house was quiet but steady. Amelia read in the mornings, drew in the afternoons, and helped me reorganize the garage just to stay active. We made a schedule. She picked her subjects. We downloaded materials. She started sleeping again, still lightly, still with one ear open, but the dark circles under her eyes began to fade. Then, on the 4th day, the doorbell rang at 11:03. The woman at the door introduced herself as Sarah Chen, a social worker with the local Child Protective Services. She held a clipboard in one hand and a sealed envelope in the other. Her tone was polite but practiced. "We received a report expressing concern about educational neglect and isolation," she said. "It's protocol for us to follow up." I let her in. She walked slowly through the living room, pausing briefly to glance at the papers spread across the dining table. Amelia's art portfolio, her printed lesson plan, the textbooks we'd checked out from the library. Her eyes lingered on the evidence folder I'd left open by the laptop, the one with photos of bruises and printed transcripts. She asked to speak to Amelia privately. I hesitated. Then I called Amelia downstairs and left them alone in the kitchen. They talked for almost an hour. I couldn't hear most of it, just the occasional murmur of voices. When they finished, Sarah stood up, thanked Amelia for her honesty, and asked to speak with me again. Her tone was different now. Less clinical, more personal. "I think we need to have a different conversation," she said, lowering her voice. "I'm Linda Morrison's cousin. I've been watching Mark hurt her for 15 years. I didn't say anything. I just waited. Linda called me last night." She continued. "She's scared, man, but she's finally ready to do something. That USB drive was just the beginning. She knows what kind of man he is. She knows what kind of boy he's raising." Sarah pulled out her phone and showed me photo after photo. Linda at family events over the years. Each one with a new injury barely hidden behind concealer or sunglasses. A dark mark on her collarbone. A swollen eye under a layer of foundation. A bruise across her wrist that disappeared halfway into the sleeve of a party dress. "She always said she fell," Sarah said quietly. "Down the stairs. Into a cabinet. Slipped in the bathroom. We all knew, but no one could prove it. Until now." She explained that she'd already spoken to a family lawyer named Catherine McKenzie. Someone who specialized in domestic abuse cases, especially those involving institutional corruption. The kind of cases where predators used their influence to rewrite truth before it ever reached a courtroom. The kind where victims got erased and abusers walked free because the system protected its own. She's handled situations like this before, Sarah said. She knows how to build a case that sticks. That night, I called Catherine. I didn't wait for more warning signs. I didn't need one more flat tire or midnight photo outside my daughter's window to justify it. We scheduled a meeting for the following morning. Catherine McKenzie's office was tucked between a dentist clinic and a real estate agency in the downtown strip. From the outside, it looked unassuming. Frosted windows, a single brass plaque, nothing more. But the moment she opened the door and invited me in, I realized this wasn't her first time dealing with someone who had come in not just for legal counsel, but because the world had stopped making sense. She didn't waste time with small talk. She asked for the files. I gave her everything. For nearly 3 hours, she reviewed every item, photos of bruises, screenshots of threatening notes, transcripts of voice recordings, documentation of school inaction, and videos from Linda's USB. She didn't interrupt. She took notes in clean, efficient lines. Occasionally, she asked clarifying questions, dates, names, timestamps. Her eyes never once left the material unless she was looking directly at me. When she finally finished, she placed her pen down with quiet precision and said, "Mark Morrison has done this before." She opened a thick folder already prepared on her desk. Inside were printed complaints from 3 other families. All filed within the last 10 years. All had involved male students connected to Mark. Friends, cousins, students in extracurricular programs he supported. Each case had followed the same pattern escalation, retaliation, then sudden silence. The families either moved, dropped the complaints, or were discredited by vague rumors and administrative reports suggesting mental instability, disciplinary issues, or uncooperative behavior. But none of them had this, Catherine said, tapping the edge of Linda's video footage. None had someone inside the house, documenting the methods. None had a witness willing to break the cycle. She laid out our next steps in logical sequence. The first priority was safety. Mine, Amelia's, and Linda's. That meant documenting everything: new threats, new damage, new behavior. The second step was strategy. Catherine wanted a broader net. Proof that Mark wasn't just enabling abuse, but orchestrating it as a calculated system of control, using his position on the school board to protect his son and silence opposition. "We're not just building a harassment case," she said. "We're going after the structure that let this happen." That evening, back at home, Amelia showed me something she hadn't told anyone about before. It was a folder on her phone, hidden behind a dummy calculator app she used to keep private files. Inside were screenshots of a group chat Archer had created with a handful of boys from school. The messages were direct and unsettling. "Make sure she doesn't sit anywhere without us seeing. Block the hallway near the gym so she has to walk past me. My dad says if enough people say she's crazy, everyone will believe it." I forwarded the entire thread to Catherine. Within 5 minutes, she called back and instructed me to back up everything on flash drives, in cloud storage, even printed if possible. She wasn't being paranoid. She was being thorough. Like, they won't stop until they're exposed, she said. And even then, they might not. 2 nights later, our doorbell camera caught movement at 3:07 a.m. The footage showed a figure matching Archer's height and build walking along the side of our property with a spray can in one hand. He stopped in front of the fence, glanced around, then began scrawling across the wooden panels. The words weren't just offensive, they were violent. There were threats, slurs, drawings that made my stomach turn. But what caught my attention more than the graffiti was what I found afterward. Our garden hose had been slashed near the nozzle, causing water to pool near the side of the house. The soil had softened, and water had begun seeping toward the foundation. Nearby, the plastic casing on the outdoor electrical outlet had been removed. Wires had been exposed. Based on the breaker panel inside, something had tripped around 250. It didn't take much imagination to understand what could have happened if the water had reached that wiring before the circuit shut itself off. This time, when I called the police, I gave them Catherine's name and asked that all inquiries go through her. Within an hour, 2 uniformed officers arrived, different from before. They photographed the fence, took a copy of the camera footage, and asked more serious questions. One of them mentioned that they'd heard of Catherine before. She doesn't lose cases, he said, especially not ones with recordings. Later that day, Catherine called again with news. Linda had come to her office. Not only did she bring more USB files, recordings from their home's internal security system, but she also handed over a stack of handwritten journals, over 20 years worth. Each one dated, annotated, and organized. Man, they detail everything, Catherine said. Names of people Mark manipulated, favors he called in, who he threatened, when, how. It's more than just abuse, it's leverage. The recordings were just as disturbing. In one, Mark was seated with Archer at the kitchen table, explaining how to intimidate classmates without getting caught. Don't leave bruises where teachers can see them. If she talks, say she's jealous. Say she wanted attention. Most people don't check the facts. They go with what sounds easy. In another, more recent video, Mark's tone had shifted. He was instructing Archer to escalate. Her father's getting bold. Time to send a message. Start with the house. Make them feel unsafe everywhere. That night, Catherine filed for emergency restraining orders on behalf of both Amelia and me. She said the hearing would be scheduled quickly, possibly within the week. But she also warned us that serving the paperwork could provoke retaliation. Be ready, she said. Once he knows he's cornered, he won't play subtle anymore.